The doorbell rang at 5:14 a.m. It startled Ethan from his sleep. He groggily rubbed his eyes, squinting at the clock. It was too early for anyone to be awake, let alone knocking at their door. He tossed the blanket off and slid his feet into slippers. "Lil, wake up," he muttered, gently shaking his wife's shoulder. "Someone's at the door." Lily groaned but sat up, her dark hair wild from sleep. "Who the hell?" She trailed off as Ethan padded to the door, his heart beginning to race for no reason at all. When he opened it, he saw something that made his breath catch. A baby. A tiny, vulnerable baby, left on their doorstep. The baby was lying in a car seat, wrapped in a frayed blue blanket, and the only other thing accompanying him was a folded piece of paper taped to the handle of the seat. The morning air was chilly, but the baby didn't cry. He just blinked, looking up at Ethan with wide, dark eyes that seemed to carry more questions than a baby should know. Ethan froze, his hand still holding the door open. Lily rushed up behind him, her breath catching in her throat when she saw the child. "Is this real?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. "Lil, I don't know," Ethan said, his voice shaky. His gaze dropped to the folded note. With trembling hands, he carefully opened it. The handwriting was hurried, but legible. "His name is Noah. He's 6 months old. He can't move his legs. I can't care for him. Please love him." A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. "Noah," he repeated quietly, as though the name might make sense of the situation. But it didn't. "Ethan," Lily breathed, reaching for the baby. "What do we do?" Before he could answer, the caseworker arrived, along with a police officer. The door had barely closed when a flurry of official people filled their living room. Papers, forms, questions, all of them asking how they could help. They couldn't take him in, they said. They weren't foster parents. But no one would take Noah right away either. He would be sent to a foster care center, they said, until anyone, could come for him. "I can't let him go," Lily said, her voice breaking as she held Noah closer, the baby's small hand curling around her finger. "We'll do whatever it takes," Ethan added, looking at the caseworker. He wasn't sure how. He didn't even know if they were legally allowed, but he knew in his gut that no one needed them. The caseworker was silent for a moment. Finally, she nodded. "If you're sure, you can keep him for now. But it's only temporary." The baby didn't cry. He didn't make a sound. He just stared up at them, as if waiting for something. And as Ethan and Lily looked at the small, helpless child, something shifted between them. They didn't need to say it out loud. Noah wasn't just a child left on their doorstep. He was theirs now. The days that followed the arrival of Noah felt like a blur to Ethan and Lily. They didn't know what they were doing, but they were doing it. Diapers, bottles, feeding schedules, and doctor visits quickly became their new normal. The initial shock of becoming parents overnight had faded into a quiet, steady routine. But it wasn't just Noah who was struggling with his new life. Ethan noticed that the nursery, which they had planned for months and was supposed to be perfect, remained half-finished. The crib was still in its box, tucked away in a corner of their bedroom, unused. They didn't need to worry about aesthetics anymore. Noah's presence had taken over everything. And somehow, that was enough. One cold morning, after a restless night with Noah, Ethan stepped into the kitchen, his coffee brewing in the corner. He glanced out the back window and froze. At the bottom of their porch steps, a dog was standing. A small, scruffy, and malnourished German Shepherd puppy, looking up at their house with wide, cautious eyes. "No way," Ethan murmured under his breath. Lily appeared beside him, her eyes following his gaze. "Is that?" The puppy's fur was patchy and thin, his ribs visible under his skin. He didn't bark or whimper. He simply stood there, staring up at the door like he had no other place to go. Ethan sighed, stepping outside, his heart already aching for the poor animal. He didn't have the energy for another responsibility, not with everything they had already taken on. But something about the dog's helplessness mirrored the helplessness of the baby they had taken in. Ethan knelt down, calling the puppy closer. The dog took a hesitant step forward, but froze when he noticed Ethan's movement. After a moment, he slowly walked over, his tail low. "He's so thin," Lily said, crouching down beside Ethan. She reached out to pet the dog, but he flinched at first. Then, after a second, he relaxed into her touch. "We can't keep him," Ethan said, shaking his head. "We're barely holding it together with Noah." "I know," Lily said softly, but she couldn't help but smile as the puppy pressed his head into her hand. "But he's like Noah. He's been abandoned. He needs help too." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. They brought the puppy inside, giving him food and water, hoping he would stay quiet long enough for them to figure out what to do. But Max, Lily had already decided to name him, wasn't so easy to settle. He hid in corners, skittish and wary, and avoided Ethan like the plague. When Noah cried, the puppy would growl low in his throat, and Ethan couldn't help but notice the way Max seemed to watch the baby, almost like he was unsure whether to feel jealous or protective. "He's just scared," Lily said one evening as she sat on the couch with Max curled up beside her. "He doesn't trust us yet." "I don't blame him," Ethan muttered, eyeing the dog. "We're not exactly easy to trust either." But that night, after Noah finally fell asleep in his crib, something shifted. Max, usually so distant, approached the crib cautiously. He sat by the side, his tail between his legs, staring at the baby. Lily caught the moment and smiled. "Maybe he's just curious." "I think he's starting to accept us," Ethan said, watching Max's hesitant movements. "Maybe we'll figure out how to make this work." They weren't sure what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure. Max wasn't just going to be a bystander in their lives. He was a part of the story now, whether they were ready or not. And somehow, Noah seemed to know it too. Every time Max approached, Noah would calm down, his eyes following the dog's every move. There was a quiet connection starting to form between the two, a bond that neither Ethan nor Lily could explain, but both of them knew was there. As the days went by, Max's presence began to feel less like an obligation and more like a blessing. Ethan started taking him for walks in the mornings, and Max, despite his skittishness, gradually warmed to him. By the time Noah had his first doctor's appointment, Max was already a steady presence in their home. And though the puppy didn't fully trust them yet, it was clear that his story and Noah's were beginning to intertwine in ways that none of them could have expected. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing one, the house felt more like a home. The quietness of their life together had settled into a rhythm, one filled with late-night feedings, doctor visits, and tender moments of quiet care. Noah, though still paralyzed from the waist down, had started to show small signs of progress. His little hands now grasped toys with more intention, and his head, once heavy and unsteady, held its position for longer periods of time. But despite their progress, Ethan and Lily both felt the weight of exhaustion in their bones. Their days blurred together, marked only by the soft sound of Noah's laughter or the gentle rustle of the baby's blanket as he shifted in his crib. Max, the malnourished puppy they had taken in, was no longer the wild, jittery animal he had been when they first found him. Though still thin, his coat had started to fill out. He no longer shrank away from their touch. Max would wag his tail every time Lily came home from running errands, and he would sit by Ethan as he worked late into the night, offering silent companionship. But something else had shifted in the house, too. Max's initial wariness toward Ethan seemed to be slowly fading. He had spent weeks avoiding the man, staying near Lily or retreating to corners when Ethan was around. But one morning, after several days of taking Max on long walks, Ethan stood in the living room, holding Noah in his arms, when the dog walked over. Max stood by the baby's crib, sniffing gently at the air. His nose twitched as he approached, and then, without warning, he nudged the blanket gently with his nose. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He lowered Noah slightly, so the baby could get a better look at Max. Lily, who had been preparing breakfast in the kitchen, heard the soft sound and rushed in. She froze in the doorway, watching as Max licked the baby's foot again, his tail wagging ever so slightly. "Is he?" Lily began, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I think he is," Ethan whispered, his eyes never leaving Max. The dog had never shown this kind of affection toward anyone other than Lily. But Noah had somehow broken through the wall Max had built around himself. Max settled down beside Noah's crib, his eyes still fixed on the baby. Ethan couldn't help but smile. In that moment, it was clear. This wasn't just a puppy they had taken in. Max had become something more, a protector, a companion, a part of their family. Later that afternoon, as Noah napped in the nursery, Max followed Ethan into the living room. The puppy's body language was still cautious, but he seemed content, settling at Ethan's feet. Ethan sat down on the couch and rested his feet on the coffee table, just watching Max. "I never thought I'd see the day," Ethan said softly. "You and me, and this dog, all under the same roof." He ran a hand through his hair. "We're not perfect, but we're trying." Max, as if understanding, stretched out beside him and let out a long sigh. It wasn't just Ethan's words that mattered. It was the quiet connection that was growing between them, the unspoken understanding. Lily joined them, sitting beside Ethan. "I think we're doing okay," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We're figuring it out." Ethan nodded, his eyes flicking from Max to Noah, who was peacefully sleeping in the next room. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But this was their life now. And somehow, they had made it work. Noah wasn't the only one growing. Max, too, was beginning to heal, learning to trust in ways Ethan never expected. And though none of them could have predicted how their story would unfold, one thing was clear. This family was stronger than they had ever imagined. Life in the house had settled into a fragile sense of normal. Ethan and Lily had gotten used to their new roles as parents, navigating the challenges of caring for Noah, who was growing stronger by the day. His therapy sessions were showing promising results. His legs were still weak, but he had gained control of his neck and upper body. The smallest improvements felt like monumental victories. But even with everything moving forward, the undercurrent of worry never quite left. They were always on edge, waiting for the next challenge. And that evening, the challenge came in a way they least expected. It was a quiet night, the kind where the house felt still, as though the world outside had forgotten to move. Lily was preparing dinner in the kitchen, and Ethan had just finished Noah's evening therapy exercises. Noah was in his crib, tucked in and sleeping soundly. Max, who had spent the better part of the day playing with Noah, was lying in his usual spot at the foot of the crib, keeping a watchful eye over the baby. The evening shadows stretched across the room as Ethan walked into the living room, turning on the television. He was just settling in when he heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible noise. The sound of something shifting. It wasn't Noah's usual grunting or fussing. This was different. A sound of something more dangerous. Before he could react, he heard the rustle again, louder this time. It came from Noah's room. Ethan shot up from the couch, his heart hammering in his chest as he sprinted to the nursery. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Noah was no longer in the center of his crib. His tiny body had wriggled its way toward the edge, his little legs hanging dangerously over the side. The crib's rails were too high for him to push himself back, and he was teetering on the edge, his body tilted at an awkward angle. His face was twisted in confusion and fear. Ethan didn't think. He rushed forward, but as he moved toward Noah's crib, He was stopped by Max. The puppy, who had always been skittish around sudden movements, was standing between Ethan and Noah. His body was tense, his eyes locked on the baby. He was barking, softly at first, then louder as the situation became clearer. Ethan stopped, unsure of what to do. He needed to reach Noah, but Max was blocking him. "Max!" Ethan called, but the dog didn't move. Instead, Max took a step forward, nudging Ethan back. Then, with a surprising amount of strength, he nudged Noah's body with his nose, gently but firmly guiding him back toward the center of the crib. Max wasn't just trying to keep Noah safe, he was actively helping. Ethan stood frozen, watching in awe as the dog, who had once been so frightened and unsure of everything, now exhibited pure courage. Max stood beside Noah, his body pressed against the crib, watching over the baby. And only then did Ethan rush in, carefully lifting Noah and placing him back in the center of the crib, away from the edge. "Good boy, Max," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking as he stroked the dog's fur. The dog's tail wagged slowly, his eyes softening in response to Ethan's praise. Lily, having heard the commotion, rushed into the room. "What happened?" she asked, looking from Ethan to Noah and then to Max, who was still standing guard beside the crib. "Max, he saved him," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Noah was about to fall. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she knelt beside Max, placing a hand on his head. "You're a hero," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We don't deserve you, Max." Max, as though understanding, lowered his head and pressed against her hand. The bond between them had deepened, and in that moment, Ethan and Lily both realized just how much Max had become part of their family. He wasn't just a dog. He was their protector, their companion, and now, he was the one who had kept their most precious gift safe. "Thank you," Ethan said, choking on his words as he finally allowed himself to exhale. "Thank you, Max." Max wagged his tail, his body relaxing into the moment of quiet affection. As they stood there in the dimly lit nursery, surrounded by their unlikely family, Ethan felt something new stir within him. Something he hadn't realized he'd needed until now. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they were capable of being the parents Noah needed, that they could face anything as long as they were together. Noah, Lily, Max, and himself. And for the first time since Noah arrived, Ethan allowed himself to believe that they might just make it. The months had passed in a blur of emotions, exhaustion, joy, fear, and hope, and the house now felt fully alive in ways that Ethan and Lily hadn't anticipated. Every corner seemed to hold a new moment of connection, from the quiet conversations shared over dinner to the soft, tender moments as they watched Noah grow stronger each day. Noah's progress was nothing short of miraculous. The therapy sessions had begun to show real results. His legs, still weak and unresponsive at first, had begun to show signs of life. The small, almost imperceptible twitches that had once seemed like distant dreams had now turned into active attempts to move his legs, to control his body. Though his condition was still far from stable, the doctors were cautiously optimistic. They didn't know how much recovery he might achieve, but Noah had proven time and again that he wasn't the type to give up. Max, too, had transformed. No longer the scared, malnourished pup they had found on their doorstep, he had blossomed into a strong, loyal companion. His coat was now thick and shiny, and he had grown in both size and confidence. He had become not just a pet, but a protector, a constant presence beside Noah, sitting by his crib, nudging him when he needed comfort, and alerting Ethan or Lily if anything was wrong. The bond between the two of them was undeniable, and it was clear that Max saw Noah as his responsibility. One afternoon, after a particularly successful therapy session, Noah was resting on a soft mat in the living room while Lily prepared dinner. Ethan sat beside him, watching as his son smiled, his tiny face lighting up with the most beautiful expression of joy. For the first time, Noah tried to roll over by himself, his body trembling with effort. "That's it, buddy," Ethan said softly, offering encouragement. He watched as Noah pushed his small arms into the mat and slowly, with great effort, managed to turn his body. It was a small victory, but to Ethan and Lily, it felt monumental. Max, who had been lounging in the corner of the room, jumped up at the sight of Noah's success. His tail wagged wildly as he bounded over, sniffing at the baby's face, as if congratulating him for the effort. Ethan laughed, reaching out to pat Max's head. "You're his biggest fan, huh, Max?" Ethan said with a grin, rubbing the dog's ears. Lily, hearing the commotion from the kitchen, peeked her head around the corner. Her heart swelled at the sight. There was Ethan, sitting on the floor beside Noah, and Max, standing guard over them like a protector. It wasn't just a family. It was a team, a unit that had come together against all odds. Later that evening, after dinner, as the house fell into a quiet lull, Lily joined Ethan on the couch. Max had already curled up at their feet, and Noah was asleep in his crib, his breathing slow and steady. The room felt peaceful, the air thick with contentment. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Lily asked softly, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. "I don't think I ever imagined this," he replied, his voice hushed. "But I wouldn't change a thing." "I can't," Lily smiled, her fingers tracing circles on his arm. "We've made it work. All of us. I didn't think it was possible, but somehow it is." Ethan nodded, his chest swelling with love. He looked over at the crib where Noah lay, so small and fragile, yet filled with such determination. And there was Max, lying at their feet, the perfect guardian, watching over them all. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ethan shot up, glancing at Lily with a puzzled look. Who could it be this time? He opened the door to find a woman standing on the porch, holding a letter in her hands. She was older than Ethan and Lily, with a weary look in her eyes. "I'm looking for the family who's been taking care of Noah," she said quietly, her voice full of hesitation. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It was her. Hannah, Noah's birth mother. "I'm Hannah," the woman continued. "I just wanted to see him, to make sure he's okay." Ethan stood still, uncertain of what to say. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to come back into their lives. Not after everything that had happened. Lily appeared behind him, her expression soft but guarded. "You don't have to worry about him," she said, her voice steady but kind. "Noah's doing better than we could have imagined." Hannah swallowed hard, her eyes brimming with tears. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't care for him." She held out the letter she was carrying. "This is for him. I just wanted him to have a better life than I could give him." Ethan accepted the letter, and as he looked at her, something shifted inside him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't resentful. He felt only pity for the woman who had been so lost that she couldn't even keep her son. "I'm glad you're okay," Lily said gently, her voice warm. "Noah's safe with us." Hannah nodded, her tears finally falling. "Thank you," she whispered, before turning to leave. As the door closed behind her, Ethan and Lily shared a quiet moment, the letter in Ethan's hands a reminder of how far they'd come, and of the uncertain journey ahead. But they were ready. Together, they could face anything. Max, Noah, and them. This was their family now.